Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and so thrilled to welcome you all to today's panel, which is a very special conversation with casting directors from a slew of Apple TV Plus television shows. From Foundation, we have Lucinda Syson. Ted Lasso, we have Theo Park, and The Shrink Next Door, we have Sherry Thomas and Sharon Bialy. And Lucinda, I wanted to start by talking to you about casting for Foundation because there's such a unique tone and specificity to this show, and it's also a show that, has a real engagement with the language that it asks the actors to have. And so I was interested with those facets in mind, kind of what the unique things were that you ended up looking for when people stepped into the casting room, or that you wanted to make sure that they had, particularly when it came to an adeptness with playing with language that maybe isn't everyday conversation language.
I mean, it was very much led by David Goyer from the start, wanting to find the right characters. He'd lived with this story for so long. The characters were very sort of deep in him, and he wanted to find the closest to those characters and let them lead us in a way to some of the accents, etc. So there were no kind of predetermined decisions necessarily on the accent. We kind of got led in a way by very organically by the characters. So we did pretty intensive casting and then just started feeling our way through what felt right, which was an incredible sort of process because, there were no guidelines. But in doing that, the sort of the discovery of where we were heading was lovely. And then we sort of formed shapes around where we were going. So it wasn't sort of, these are your instructions, follow these on accents. It was more, let's find these characters who fits best and then go with it. So Laura Byrne, for example, who plays Demoiselle, has got a slight Scandinavian accent. And we've got some British accents going on in American and sort of slight South African. Also, we're dealing with future accents. So, they, at a certain point, accents will have sort of got to a point of being quite mixed. So really, it was more about finding the right cast, the right people fitting the roles, and then letting them lead the way, which is a nice way of doing it.
That's really wonderful. And then Theo, when it comes to casting for Ted Lasso, there's such a mix of cast members who have so much experience within the comedic space, within television. If you look at someone like Nick Mohammed, he's been around for years. He's got his own show that he's created. And then you have, an actor like Toheeb, where this is the first time that he's had an opportunity to take on a role like this within a television series. And it melds together so well. And I was interested in how much of an idea you had of where you were looking for actors that had that specific experience, and where you were really looking for new and kind of the next generation of voices that you could bring into the show as well, or if it was just a natural byproduct of the way that you ended up casting.
It was actually quite exciting because we didn't need, there was no need to have a name. We already had Jason. So across the board, really, we could have fun and just bring in people who are really good. And I feel really proud of the cast, actually, because a lot of them aren't known. It's great that you know Nick Mohammed. I'm sure lots of people didn't, but it was great. I think with the case of like Rupert, Anthony Head, there was a desire to get someone who was sort of known to an American audience, and I think we achieved that with him. But yeah, the rest of them, we had free reign. It was really, really exciting.
And then Sherry and Sharon talking about The Shrink Next Door, when you hear the names Will Ferrell, Paul Rudd, Katherine Hahn, Casey Wilson, it conjures up a certain idea of a comedic space. And the show actually dances really interestingly between the dramatic and almost kind of a dark, underhanded humor within it. And so did you find that when people were stepping into the room, that there was a certain comedic sensibility that they thought maybe they were bringing into their roles or bringing into specific scenes? Or how did you work to guide them to make sure that they really understood what the really unique and beautiful tone of this series was going to be for their performances?
Well, I think, when you look at if you listen to the podcast, which I was a big fan of the podcast, that piece of art, if you will, and storytelling was really funny, but in a very dark way. And I think Georgia and Michael did such a great job in taking that and then putting it on the page. And so you kind of knew that Paul and Will were going to bring obviously the comedic sensibility because they are just funny people, but then they were going to ground it. And I think people are going to be really surprised as it continues to unfold, because it does get very dark in the end. And then Catherine Hahn, I mean, as we know, can do anything. And Casey Wilson really, truly is primarily known for her heightened comedic sensibility. But, you know, as casting directors, we bring in actors all the time over and over again for a variety of roles. And we had brought her in on The Handmaid's Tale. We had cast her in Mrs. Fletcher. We had brought her in on a little indie movie where she really was able to show a side of her that maybe many don't have an idea about. And so it was really sort of a natural fit for her with Paul to, you know, play his wife. And then the rest of the cast, you know, was round out in that very same way with, you know, people that we know and have cast before, who can really, you know, toe the line down the middle of both sides, drama and comedy, which is what everybody, you know, I think is excited to do, to show those different sides.
And a question for all of you, because you're all casting, you know, both with these projects and a lot of other projects that you do, you know, like Theo was saying, we had Jason Sudeikis, you know, you have Will Ferrell, you have Paul Rudd, you've got Jared Harris in your projects. And so even if you're casting someone to just come in momentarily for a scene or a few lines as a day player, or even a, you know, a series arc of a few episodes, you really need to make sure that these are people that can hold their own. And also they're stepping into an already existing ecosystem of a show, and they have to be able to step onto that set day one, read what's happening, and almost have a malleability quality to them to really read the situation around them, read the scene, and work with their scene partners very instinctively. And so I was interested for all of you in how that aspect of casting really shapes what you're looking for and the way that you're working with actors in the room, beyond just thinking about the words on the page and the scene itself.
Well, I think room is very loose right now because it's all for us over Zoom. So the room is like this. And I think, you know, a little is lost in that energy, unfortunately.
I also think you kind of make a promise to your producers to provide an asshole-free set. And when you're looking for people to come into a family that's already existing and already filming, you want to make sure the way the actor works, how they approach material, who they are, you know, is important so that they can come in and not be an asshole. And it also starts at the top, because Paul and Will were incredible leaders. And especially on this show, Sherry and I got so many notes from actors who said, oh my God, I had one line and Will Ferrell came up to me and Paul Rudd introduced himself and they were so kind and asked me if I wanted to rehearse. And when you have, you know, and they're their heroes, many of them. And a lot of people hadn't worked in a while due to COVID. So I think when you have the number 1 and 2 on the call sheet setting the tone, it changes everything.
Absolutely.
And obviously when you're casting for episodic, it's such an ongoing process. And kind of, again, for all of you or anybody who wants to jump in, I was interested in, when you first have conversations with a filmmaker or with a showrunner, what the most useful tools are that they can give you in really understanding exactly what it is that they're trying to find, you know, what that spark is or what that idea of a character is beyond what you see in the script pages, and then how that really evolves as you work with them throughout the season and you get to see the episodes, and how that then gives you a whole other set of things that you can look for within the room.
Yeah, I mean, you know, on Foundation, it's such a sort of vast cast in a way, and so we wanted kind of a lot of diversity. We wanted, you know, this were being responsible for the future, and sort of creating that world. And so I think, you know, and I think Asimov as well, you know, that's a sort of sacred turf in many ways. And amazingly, Foundation is taught at schools in Scandinavia. Sort of, you know, it's books that they read at school. So it's sort of sacred ground in a sense. So those first steps into sort of creating the world. I mean, having the likes of, you know, Jared Harris, my God, that's sort of a gift. And, you know, the wonders of Lee Pace as Cleon, and, you know, amazing. And I think those were sort of the pillars that were initially kind of planted. And then that search, we swapped Gal, Lulabelle's role was originally male in the book. So we sort of had some changes going on, which a lot, I mean, Goya certainly is an incredible person to work with in the sense that he had a really exploratory attitude towards it all, but was really quite clear on when we found the sort of the first sort of like with Lou, we tested, in a huge search for Gull, and it became very obvious quite quickly. We had sort of big tests going on there, about 6 actresses from a vast kind of search, got reduced down to 3, and then Lou just stood out a mile, and the same with Leah. I think it's, more than anything, it's the communication with each other, certainly on something like Foundation, where it is all about discovery of these characters. There are no set, paths. And in that, even though it sounds quite scary, it's actually exciting, to discover them all together, in a sense. No one's got any sort of set rules. So that was Foundation case anyway. Yeah.
And how about for you, Sherry and Sharon, on Shrink Next Door?
Well, I think because it was based on a true story, and it is very clear and obvious that we are, in a different decade, throughout, you have to find a way to stay true to the storytelling, but you also have to be mindful of the world that we're living in and representation in terms of the underrepresented communities. So it was, being able to have those conversations with creators who were very open to it and understood it. And I think we did a really good job of finding those roles that it made sense, to do that with. And, really proud of that. And it was really challenging. I mean, we did this in the throes of COVID, in the lockdown period. None of us were back in the office even a little bit. And it was a massive cast. So, kudos to our team, our associate and our assistant, Alyssa Morris and Katie Rampey, who really, helped and represented in those roles, those day players, the people that really stood out and made a difference, who were so good, even in those tiny little parts.
Yeah, a show lives or dies on the day players, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that what we tried to do on Ted Lasso was make sure that even in the day players, we just got people who just had really good range, could do comedy and drama.
Yep.
And one of the things I learned quite early on in the process, because I wasn't, Ted Lasso was a new show. I didn't really know what tone it was at the beginning, but then it was really clear after a few conversations with Jason that we weren't looking for people to play up the comedy. We wanted everyone to be really naturalistic, because the comedy is there on the page, and so that they're the people we went for. We went for the people who just played it really straight.
And that's why you won the Emmy.
And Theo, because you've had the opportunity now to go through 2 seasons of Ted Lasso, and I believe you're already in the midst of everything for season 3, what has been the evolution for you and your team in how you feel that you've evolved the way that you're working on casting this show? Because even like you said, at the beginning, it was this really unique spark. Nobody knew what the tone was going to be until it actually was executed. And now I imagine you have people coming in who've, completely devoured every single episode and have a really strong sensibility of what that show is when they walk into the room with you.
Well, you'd be surprised. I kind of want to say to some of them, have you seen it? Watch it again. Because there's still, but it's difficult, isn't it? Because these poor actors, they're not coming into the room. We're still doing self-tapes, which is really, really frustrating. And so, you want to just say to everyone, do less, especially for this, just do less.
And speaking of self-taping, I think one of the things that I find really fascinating in looking at the work that you do virtually is the idea of chemistry reads and screen tests with people, because you're really most of the time trying to pair someone up, and it's not just about how they're reading the scene, but how they're interacting, how they're working together, how they're really figuring out those beats with one another. And so I was interested how that part of the job has really evolved, in the way that you have to almost look at what they're doing and look at the minutia a little bit differently, but at the same time you still do have the advantage that it is on screen and you are looking at how ultimately it is going to convey itself on screen. So there is that aspect as well, which I thought was quite interesting.
Well, believe it or not, we do a lot of callbacks with this view, and you have your producers in the boxes, and then they go to black and mute, we hope, and the two actors who are reading together, will do so. It's not the best scenario, but it's the best we have right now, and it does work. And I think it's incumbent on casting directors to really know their actors even more, so that if there's not an instant chemistry, you understand if it's because of the Zoom and how odd it is, or if it's just because they really operate on different levels as an actor and it may not mesh.
Yeah, absolutely.
And have you found, sorry.
No, it is. It's such an artificial way of doing it. But on the other hand, you've got to try, Sharon said, try and make the best of it. And in a way, you're as far away from the actor, whereas usually in a room you can pick up sort of energies and give looks and stuff. You just don't have that facility on Zoom. So it is, it's a new way of kind of working, isn't it? Whereas we do, I think all of us miss being in the room. You just can't beat that in some ways. But, at least I guess the one thing it has helped with is sort of extensive casting with all these self-tapes, probably further than we would sometimes reach, because it's all about self-tapes. But it's a funny process, isn't it, with the sort of the actor reading Zooms.
Yeah, you miss that thing where an actor can come in the room and in the first 10 seconds, just with their body language and their vibe, you just know that they're the right person for the part. You totally miss that on a Zoom sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And because Sharon was mentioning, having the producers, having filmmakers, having showrunners on the Zoom as well, have you found that there's more accessibility for filmmakers and for showrunners and for the creative team to be there within the casting process than when you were doing it physically in person as well, because it's easier for them to just be able to jump in and know that if something comes up that they need to be pulled into, that they can step away for a second?
Yeah, only when we want them to be.
Yeah, but I think because everyone's looking at them, sometimes they don't volunteer, they stay well out of the process. So they let us lot get on with that.
Yeah. And because you just made that aside, Sherry, is that to do with the way that you feel that you're able to work with actors when they step into a room, when it's just you, it's just your reader, and it's just them?
Yes, I think that sometimes, we have a great shorthand with actors. I think that, directors are amazing and we learn so much from them. But when you don't have a director and you just have perhaps the writers and the creators of the show, it might not be an authentic skill set that they have. And sometimes, we can sit there, and this is not a dig or anything like that, but, we can sort of go, oh God, just what to say to them to get them to do exactly what they're asking them to do. It's because it's what we do all day, every day in a room with actors. We know how to modulate that performance or say one word to make them just sort of shift and give the creators exactly what they want. So I think what self-taping does now is it affords us the opportunity to be much more creative in a way. When you would cast in a room, you have only a certain amount of slots available. If you're having a 2-hour session, you've got to be selective of who's going to fill those 2 hours. If you're self-taping, you can really kind of sometimes throw things up against a wall and see if it works. And it gives you the opportunity to maybe get to know a bigger bandwidth of actors that you may not have been able to. So I think it has its good and its bad, and I think we're all dying to get back in the room for sure. But we are certainly taking advantage of the opportunity we've been given.
And I think there's something that Sharon and Sherry, that the two of you have spoken about in the past in terms of the ways that you can kind of modulate performances you were describing, Sherry, but non-verbally, just little things like if an actor comes in and they're reading too fast, the reader can read a little bit slower, and that's naturally going to pull them into their space. And so I wanted to ask all of you about some of the things that you try to do in the room to really support actors and to really kind of guide their performances into the spaces that you're looking for and what you want to be able to see from them in that moment that maybe aren't even notes that you're giving them or things that you're saying out loud to them.
I think what does work with these self-tapes, when you're Zooming with the actor, if you want to have them do it again, or if it's a callback and it's just the casting director and the actor, is we start off with, okay, we're going to do a lot of takes and we're not going to let you leave this Zoom until you're happy and we're happy. So let's just play with it at the top. So there's a freedom that they can make mistakes. And as Sherry said, if there's 5 producers in the room, they don't have the time to do that. And this way we're going, okay, that was great, but let's do it again. Okay, that was great, but here's what they've been talking about, what you might not know because you haven't read 10 scripts. This is what's going to happen later. Okay, let's do it again. Let's throw it away. Okay, are you happy with that take? And if they say, no, can we do one more? We go, yeah, let's do it. So I think that freedom and mostly the support and love that an actor feels allows them to do great work because somebody on the other side already believes in them.
We're championing them. And I think that our title should somewhat sometimes be casting director-apist, meaning we're also a therapist to a lot of these actors, especially when we've known them for such a long time. And, there's a comfortability, and you just, part of it is making them be in an atmosphere where they can do their best work.
And it's also, isn't it, that sometimes you just, after the experience, I guess, of many years, sometimes when something's not quite working, it's just, it could be that Sharon said you think, actually, wait a minute, it's like they're not aware of this point about the character. So it's just reassuring. And sometimes it's as simple, honestly, an actor will say, oh, I didn't realize that, or oh, sorry, I hadn't even thought about it that way. And then, something clicks. So it's the little details. It's those little details sometimes that you think, or it's not going to work, and, whatever you try. But it just, I guess it's that thing of, the actor not sitting there with their heart beating like mad, thinking, oh my God, this is the do or die of me getting this role. At least with us, they can have that time that allows them to make mistakes. And I think that's the sort of vital part of our jobs, is kind of, in a way, there are no mistakes, just letting them have their goes and guiding them.
And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about the casting community and itself and mentorship, both that you've all experienced and that you're trying to carry forward as casting directors now. Lucinda, I know you started out working with Priscilla John, Theo with Nina Gold, and Sharon and Sherry, you talk very frequently about how, you're so proud of people that came in as assistants or associates and have become casting directors themselves. And there was something that you've mentioned before, Lucinda, about how when you first came into the industry, it felt a bit more fragmented in terms of the casting community, and there wasn't a union there. And then even, when you all jumped into Zoom, you all know each other, you've all crossed paths, and it feels like there is a real connectivity and sense of community. And so for all of you, I was interested in just that journey and that evolution of mentorship that you've received, mentorship that you're trying to pass along, and how you feel that that's really evolved during your time in the industry.
Great question.
That's a really good question. I mean, I'll speak for me because my mentor happens to now be my business partner. So I feel very fortunate and very lucky. I hope I don't cry. It's possible. But, you know, I went to work for Sharon, you know, many, many years ago on a pilot. And I think it's kind of like with actors, you just get a sense and you know, and you understand, and you go, wow, this feels really good and really right. And I feel I have something to offer her as much as I feel that she is going to offer me, you know, in abundance. So, and I think she gave me autonomy right from the beginning. There was no, well, when I, you know, was a kid, I had to walk 9 miles to get to the bus stop, to get to the, you know, there was none of that shit. And I felt it was so refreshing to be in that environment where somebody not only wanted me to grow, but wasn't afraid for me to grow. And I think that as casting directors, sometimes when I was an assistant prior to that, there was sometimes a sense of fear over, could they ultimately one day take what I have? And I think that we are hopefully breeding a new generation of casting directors that really uplift and support each other and want to see the other one succeed, and are sharing information in a way that we never did before, even about deal making. You know, we're trying to get rid of the elitism, I hope. You know, and that's just my experience. And about 3 years later, we became business partners, and you know, it's a marriage, and we have been through all of it together, professionally, personally, and you know, we're doing something right, you know, because we still love each other, want to work together, and still super passionate about what we do, and have a staff that I think feels the same way that I did when I started with Sharon, and it was just the two of us.
I also think today, in a great way, there is an attitude of mentorship, of more inclusivity and diversity, that we realize that our business has not historically done the best job at it. And as the frontline people, we can start doing that. So I think we all sort of took a real hard look after the past couple of years and said, what can we do to make sure that we are more inclusive, not just in who we cast, but in who we hire, and how do we attract a larger base of people to come to the world of casting, the best and the brightest, you know. And I think, at least in the United States, part of what has changed is that we do have a union. So people know that if they get into casting, they could have as good a pension as if they go work at Trader Joe's. And that's really important when you're trying to attract people to come work for you. And I think we've gotten better with that as well.
I go back to what I originally said, and there's, you know, it was so fragmented. When I started, it was pockets of people who didn't talk to each other. And like anything, you know, it's the legend, you're frightened of the legend. When we all meet each other, talk to each other, have a glass of wine or water, whatever, you know, and start forming, you know, all those kind of fears go for the most part. And you start kind of realizing, you know, that and I hate to say it, but it's like united we stand. And it's like, you know, we have a voice, and we can, you know, we're all so excited about, in a way, that this new wave of an awareness of diversity, of equality. And we've all been sort of nitpicking at this for ages, but as a sort of united front, we that seems to be able to change things more and help change things more. And I think it's so much nicer to actually have you know, networks and a proper profession where we're not, you know, the sort of the folks in the office down the road looking at photographs. You know, we're much more involved. You can see, you know, I think brilliant Gina J and Shaheen Baig sort of very brilliantly have a casting course at the National Film School starting up. And Theo, I don't know if you've been involved in that too, but you know, how brilliant is that? So there's a proper push towards professionalism. I mean, I have Natasha Vincent, you know, is now a brilliant casting director, but still, you know, we work together. She's been with me for 8 years, 10 years even, you know, Lucy Taylor, my team, Lily, Becky, you know, there is this really lovely feeling of unity, learning, growth, and trying to really push the profession and the professionalism of the profession. And I think, I really think that's a really positive, I think it's going to keep growing. And as Sharon says, to sort of try and widen that and pull, people in from all sorts of different corners, and, keep the profession kind of growing.
Say something if there are people watching who want to be casting directors and it's still very prevalent today that there are casting directors who won't hire people to come into the business if they've never done casting. And we have had a lot of luck hiring young assistants who have an expertise in another area, managerial, human resources, and those people who really love casting and want to be in it, and who have taken the courses that, the Casting Society of America developed a course, and Gohar Gazazian, who's, one of the casting directors in our office, helped develop it. And Stacia Kimler, our associate, teaches it. Like, people come into those, and I think even for other casting directors to listen, the passion for wanting to come in, along with IQ and experience in another arena, can really make a great casting director. You don't have to have one assistant job before. We've had a lot of luck with it.
Mm-hmm. I think Fiona Weir was production coordinator. It's coming in from all sorts of different corners and stuff. So.
Right.
Well, I want to thank all of you so much for sharing all of your expertise and your knowledge and talking about these fantastic shows that you're all working on at the moment. Congratulations on everything with all of those, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.